I recently reread Dave Ramsey's book, The Total Money Makeover. And if you've ever heard of this book, it's the one that gives you those baby steps of what it takes to become financially independent, financially healthy, even financially wealthy. And Dave Ramsey uses a quote a lot of times in this book that if you will live like no one else now, then you can live like no one else later. Meaning, if you live a very frugal and sacrificial life today in regard to your finances, you can experience a lot of abundance in your later years. And a lot of us think about our securities for the future. We pay into Social Security. We pay into our retirement accounts. We pay into those Roth IRAs, into our investments. And we accumulate land. We accumulate property. We accumulate possessions. We build equity in our homes. We do all of that so that we could spend our last 10 or 20 years on this earth living as comfortably as possible. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with saving for retirement. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I don't think there's anything wrong with Dave Ramsey's book. Like I said, I read it twice. I think you should probably read it at least once yourself. But those retirement years, those are really a drop in the bucket compared to the time that we're going to spend in the millennial kingdom of Jesus. And of course, statistically, those 20 years are just absolutely nothing compared to our eternities in heaven. And so a lot of us are just way off base in our mindsets on this. I would say with the amount of time we spend planning for our retirement compared to how much time that we spend planning for forever. I mean, it's one thing to earn rewards, and actually we talked about that a lot last week. That's what all of last week's episode was about, earning those rewards in the afterlife. But did you know that the Bible also has a whole lot to say about losing them? I mean, think of the devastation that you would feel if you lost all of your retirement account, all of your retirement savings. Imagine how devastating that would be if it all just disappeared. Well, it would be a tragedy of an even greater magnitude if all the work and accomplishment that you put into earning your afterlife rewards, your heavenly rewards, if they got wiped away as well. And what are the things that we can do to lose our eternal rewards? You're going to find that out today on the Cross References podcast. Welcome to the Book of Ezekiel, a Cross References Bible study where we learn how every small piece of the Bible tells one big story and how they all connect to the cross and Christ. My name is Luke Taylor, and I'm going to be going to heaven someday, and I just want to make it as great as it can be. And I want to tell you today how you can make it as great as possible as well. You've probably often heard sermons or messages before on eternal rewards. And so if you didn't listen to last week's episode, you might be wondering, what is a millennial kingdom reward? This episode today is called Millennial Kingdom Rewards, How to Lose Them. And so the reason I'm calling them millennial kingdom rewards is because it appears that a lot of the verses that we look at in regard to what we call eternal rewards a lot of the time, a lot of them actually specifically are said about the millennial kingdom. And so what I'm wanting to do this time is really get us in that mindset of thinking about how we want to spend that 1,000-year period where Christ is reigning on this earth, and we are ruling and reigning with him. We are administrators in his kingdom, assisting Jesus as Lord and King of the world. I want us to talk today about, or be thinking about, what we can do to have as many rewards as possible and have as high of a position as possible in the kingdom of Christ. And so today we're going to be talking about, maybe you might say on the negative side, but I don't mean it negative today. I want to tell you the things that we can do to lose those rewards so that you don't do them. So don't think of this as negative. This is very positive. This is information that I think you would want to know. And so, yes, this is my Book of Ezekiel podcast. The reason I'm talking about this today, even though we're not technically in the book of Ezekiel, but we've been in a section of Ezekiel that's really focused on this millennial kingdom time frame. We're in the last 9 chapters of Ezekiel, and so this covers the millennial kingdom from kind of looking at it from a religious or temple point of view, the millennial temple that's going to be there. But there's 9 chapters, Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48, that deal with that. We've covered 5 of them here on the podcast. We've got 4 more to go, and then the podcast is done. So we're kind of just taking our time as we walk through this and kind of stepping back from the book and just talking about other things that we need to consider about the millennial temple period, the millennial kingdom period, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And so what I want us to just be thinking about last week and this week is what we're going to be doing in that temple, in that kingdom. We might be in the temple, we might not. What we're going to be doing as part of Jesus's kingdom, and what we could do to lose rewards that we've gained. We don't want to lose what we've gained. And so that's what I want to talk about today. That's why we're talking about this today. And by the way, rewards that we get for the millennium, they could apply to eternity as well. I'm not saying that they couldn't, but I just noticed as we went through these verses last week talking about rewards that we often call eternal rewards, a lot of them actually sound really like that. They're really about that 1,000-year reign of Christ time period. And so maybe we could earn even more rewards based on our service during that time that we carry into eternity. I don't know, but a lot of the verses I think actually do just apply specifically to the millennium. And so since, again, we're in a section of Ezekiel that's dealing with the millennial kingdom, so that's why we're taking a break from the book of Ezekiel for a few weeks here and just talking about those rewards. So as we established over the past few weeks, we are going to have work to do in the millennial kingdom of Jesus. Now, what will that work be? Well, hey, can't know it specifically, but because it's I think it's going to be specific to you, to your giftings, to your callings. I think it's probably going to reflect what you did, or maybe what your calling to do was while you were here on this earth, and that mission that God put you here for right now, like today, as you're listening to this, whatever your mission is now, he might expand that mission in the millennial kingdom. And so we established that rewards can be greater service in the kingdom, greater position in the kingdom, and greater access to God in the kingdom. And we looked at some examples from the book of Ezekiel where the Levites had not done such a hot job back when they were given kind of leadership of the spiritual state of Israel. They didn't do such a great job with that. And so they were downgraded when they come to the millennial kingdom. Meanwhile, a certain group of priests who were called the sons of Zadok, and that could be literally people who were children of Zadok, or it could be speaking maybe kind of symbolically of just the priests who did do a good job. Well, they're given an enhanced service in the millennial kingdom. And so we kind of use them as an example. I believe King David has a role to play as the prince of the temple, and we're going to see him come up some more as we study out Ezekiel over the next few months. But what you did on this earth before will determine what kind of service you're going to be performing for Jesus in the millennium. And so last week, what we left off on was this verse from 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 11 through 15. We'll read that again. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Again, just to stop there for a second. So that means that's the gospel right there. If you've been saved, you have a foundation of Jesus Christ. You're not going to lose that whenever you come before the judgment seat of Christ and you're judged for the works that you did while you were on this earth. He's not going to look at you and say, you were just such a crappy Christian. You just don't make it in. Okay, you lost your salvation. He's not going to do that. Okay, it's not a judgment of salvation. This is a judgment of works, which means it's going to operate a little bit differently. When it comes to your salvation, that is not a judgment of works. Salvation is by grace. There is no works that can save you, right? So, and I believe it logically follows it's not works that cause you to lose your salvation. And when we got to Ezekiel chapter 18, I did a few episodes talking about that issue. And so it's not, salvation is a judgment based on grace, the grace of God, and we get the record of Jesus applied to us. However, when it comes to the judgment seat of Christ and the judgment that we're going to be looking at right here in 1 Corinthians 3, this is not a judgment that's based on grace. Okay, this is based on your performance as a Christian. This is kind of like that parable of the 10 minas and the parable of the talents, that there are different servants. They did differing levels of excellence in their service. All right, let me get back to the verses here. No foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Verse 12. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet as through fire. And so what this is saying right here is that you can have good works, you can have things that you have done to try to build on that foundation. The foundation was Jesus Christ. You can try to build on that foundation, but if the work that you've built on that foundation, it was not of a good enough quality, and we'll talk about things that could make it not a good quality, it's going to be burned up. You're not going to be rewarded for those things. Some of those things will just be lost. If some people, everything that they did was maybe for selfish reasons. It was not really for building the kingdom of God. And so everything that they accomplished in this world, it's all going to be burned up whenever they get before the judgment seat of Christ. And so only those who are, they'll still be saved. It said saved yet as though through fire. Okay, they're just going to barely come out on the other side. They'll go into heaven, but they're going to have nothing to show for it. Okay, the day is going to reveal each one's work. And so we will all do some good works, I'm sure. Okay, we all do different good works to some degree. But for some people, it's going to be burned up. They're not going to have much to show for it. Other people spent a life of service, maybe just very quiet service to God, and you wouldn't even know what they had done because they kind of just kept it to themselves and they kept it private and personal between them and God, and all of that survives the test. So some people will have great reward when they get to heaven. Other people might not have much to show for it. But remember, last week we talked about the verse that said, not even a cup of cold water given in his name is going to be forgotten. So maybe there's something that we just thought was a small thing. We didn't think it was that big of a deal. But Jesus comes to you at the judgment seat of Christ. He says, hey, that wasn't maybe a big thing, but you had a pure heart about it. You didn't do it to make a show. You did it for the right reasons. You did it in my name. And so, well done, good and faithful servant. You did that with a pure conscience. You will get a reward even for that small thing. And so it's not about how big or small it is as much as if you were doing it for the right reasons. So we're going to explore today what causes some of our good works to not survive the judgment. Because I think it would literally be a tragedy if you put work into accomplishing something for God and then you had nothing to show for it. And that could very well happen. And so what are some of those things that could cause us to lose our eternal rewards? Well, number one, it's going to be sins of commission, and that would be doing something wrong on purpose. I think that would be pretty obvious. Like, I don't think I need to spend much time on that one. Yes, you do something wrong, it's bad. So do something that you're not supposed to do. That's called a sin. That's the kind of thing that could cause you to lose eternal rewards. Not much to say about that, but there's another type of sin that we got to watch out for, and those are called sins of omission. And James 4:17 speaks about this. It says, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. That means that if you know something that you should do, but for whatever reason you can make up an excuse and you don't do that thing that you know that you should do, that's still a sin. You can't say, what do you mean I was sinning? I was just sitting here. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Well, you might have been doing something wrong if you were supposed to be doing something else. So those are called sins of omission, and that's another type of sin that we want to be aware of and make sure that we don't think, oh, well, if I just stay home tonight and watch TV, I can't be doing anything wrong. Well, if you know that there was something you were supposed to be doing tonight, then yes, it would be a sin to stay home. So do you see how that works? Sometimes we make excuses and we try to say, well, I didn't go out and commit a sin. I just stayed here and didn't do anything. So that's not good. That's not bad. That's just neutral. Well, God says, no, it's still bad if you had something good you were supposed to be doing. So to him who knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, the Bible says for him, it is sin. So last week I kept saying the phrase, what you do today matters for forever. But also what you don't do today might matter for forever. Here's another verse that I think we would be good to look at again. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? And this is Jesus speaking in Matthew 5:46. Okay, you shouldn't expect a cookie just because you did something nice for somebody who is nice to you. Okay, you can't really expect God to reward you for something like that. because that's just kind of like a basic thing that people should do. It's just being a person. Okay. He says, even non-Christians, even the tax collectors and sinners, they know well enough that you be nice to people who are nice to you. Okay. So don't expect a reward just for that, but be nice to the people who are not nice to you. All right. Do something nice for someone that you don't even expect is going to return the favor to you. That kind of goes with the sin of omission idea. All right. Doing something nice for a person that, you think maybe they don't like me very much. Maybe I'm not getting anything out of this by doing something for them. There's no benefit to me. Go ahead and do something nice for them anyway. Jesus called us to love our enemies. Don't just love the people who are good to you, but love the people who are not so good to you. All right. Love people even whenever you don't expect anything in return. That's the kind of stuff God is actually going to reward you for. He says, if you love those who love you, what reward is that to you? Yeah, good question. Right? So don't expect a reward. Don't expect God to give you a cookie just because you love someone who's nice to you. Okay, that's the easy part. The hard part is loving people who are not nice to you. Something else we got to be aware of whenever it comes to the judgment seat of Christ is that we're going to be judged for every word that comes out of our mouths. Matthew 12:36 says, "But I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment." So anything that you say, and some of us say a lot of things, we're going to have a lot to answer for whenever we get in front of Jesus. All right? And we can't just say, "Oh, I've sinned, I've said stuff I shouldn't have, but it's all under the blood." Well, if it was before you were saved, then yeah, it's under the blood. It's thrown into the deepest part of the ocean. You never have to worry about that again. So that's great. But if it's after you were saved, so you've become a Christian, all right, so you're a believer, well, you're not having to worry about going to hell. Okay? Now your judgment of salvation is on grace. That's all under the blood. But when it comes to your eternal rewards or your millennial kingdom rewards, that you can't just say that's under the blood. You've got to answer for the way that you behaved after you became in Christ. And so he says, every word that came out of your mouth after you became a Christian, you're going to be held accountable for those things. And so there's stuff that we could say that could cause us to literally lose rewards because we'll have to give an account for the things that we say. Even every idle word. If I just leave my computer, I'm not pushing any buttons, I'm just kind of leaving it alone and the screen goes blank, and it just kind of is running in the background and it's just kind of not doing anything important. We call that, it's just idle. If you turn on your car, but you're not driving anywhere, you're not going forward, you're not going in reverse, you're just letting it run, that's called just letting it idle. All right? So even the words that we say that we think are just neutral, they might not just be considered neutral to God. It even says in Proverbs, in a multitude of speech that is not without sin, meaning that if you blab your mouth all day, you have probably said something that's going to trip you up and you're going to be held accountable for it. So you don't need to talk all the time. We get ourselves into trouble. Even just the idle things that we say, we got to be careful about that. All right. Let's go on to another one. Doing the right thing with the wrong motivations. Sometimes we think that we have done this great work and we are so proud of ourselves because we accomplished this great thing. We gave $100,000 to the church building fund. I haven't done that. I don't have $100,000 to give, but let's just say, we give $100,000 to the building fund. We spent all summer long helping the church build on or renovate that room in the basement, and we just feel so good about it, all right? But maybe we had selfish reasons for doing all that. Maybe it's because we really were just doing it because we wanted the pastor to get up in front of the congregation at the end of the summer and say, well, hey, Mr. So-and-so spent his whole summer helping us out. And all you were really in for it for was the glory and the applause because you just helped lay that plywood and all that stuff to help with that renovation. If you're in it for the applause, then you're not in it for the right reason. And God actually says he's not going to reward you for that. Okay. And if you give $100,000 to the church, that's a wonderful thing. Hopefully your pastor's spiritually mature enough that he's not going to go blab that to the whole church. Okay, because we shouldn't just be going around doing things like that to get acclaim. Leave that between you and God. We're going to get into some verses about that here. Matthew 6, 1 through 4. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. And I've heard it said before, this is literally what people would do, is they'd go out to announce their good deeds and literally blow a trumpet. They'd stand up on the street corner, doo, doo, doo. I just gave $5 to that homeless man over there on the corner. And they did it for the acclaim. They wanted to be known for their good works. Jesus says, hey, don't expect to be rewarded for that $5 that you gave that guy. You did it to be seen by men. You did it to be seen. And so what did he say? You will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. So now let's talk about the tragedy aspect. Go back to that $100,000. Hey, it's great if you go give $100,000 to the church, if you have $100,000 to give, okay? I would have to go rob a bank or something like that to get $100,000. So it wouldn't be good if I did that. There'd be some questions. But don't go out and if you ever give a great sum of money to kingdom work, to a homeless shelter, to a charity, to a great nonprofit organization, okay? If you give a significant sum of money to them, that's great that you did that. Don't tell a soul, okay? Don't do it to be seen by men. Now, if someone else goes out and exalts you for it, we might say, that's not your fault. But don't try to go out there just seeking the glory for something like that. Because here's what the tragedy would be. You give $100,000 to, let's say, a Christian nonprofit, and you really did it because you wanted people to say, whoa, that person gave all that money to Jesus. And you were really doing it for the vainglory. And so God says, if you did it for the glory of man, then I can't reward you. So if you really want to be rewarded by God for it, don't tell a soul. All right, just keep it to yourself as much as possible between you and whoever took the money. And other than that, just try to be anonymous. Because I want you to get rewarded for that in heaven. I don't want you to get to heaven and find out that you got as much reward for that $100,000 that you gave to the charity as if you had just spent it on a sports car. Okay, I would rather you get an actual eternal reward out of that. Okay, I would want that to be a good investment. So don't do it to be seen by men. And it said in verse 3, this is Matthew 6, 3 and 4. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. I mean, I see people post stuff on Facebook sometimes. Oh, it was so humbling to give a homeless man $20. And they just go post that on Facebook. And I'm like, it was so humbling to go give a homeless man $20. Or they'll say, I mean, I've literally seen this stuff before, guys. They use the word humbling a lot. It was so humbling to pay for that person behind me in the Chick-fil-A drive-thru today. I just wanted to bless another person. And I'm just like, why are you going out and telling the whole world about that? If you gave someone $20, that's a nice thing to do. Why are you posting about it on Facebook? I mean, I think you're doing the opposite of humbling here, right? Like, this is self-exaltation. This is not humbling. And wasn't it Jesus who said, he who humbles himself will be exalted, and he who exalts himself will be humbled? I think if you go posting about your good deeds on Facebook, that's the opposite of being humble, right? I don't know if I can make some people mad by saying that, but if you got a good counter argument, leave a comment or something, let me know. But I just think that's the opposite of being humble, to go posting about your good deeds. And when I know there's someone I know, and every single time, I guess I don't know what they do every day, but every time they do a good deed for someone, they want to go and tell everybody else about it. And I remember this person one time, he said he found $10 at the store, at like a gas station or something. And he's like, I found the $10 at the gas station. He's like, most people would have just taken that $10. But I'm a Christian. I know that God's always watching. So I knew I shouldn't just take that $10. I should try to find out who it belonged to. So I took it inside to the gas station attendant and I said, hey, I'm a Christian. I know most people would have just taken that $10, but I'm a Christian. I knew I shouldn't keep it. So I'm just going to give it to you. I turned it into lost and found. And, I'm just trying to do the right thing before God. And then he tells me, and I bet that gas station attendant just put that $10 in his pocket because he's probably not a Christian. I'm a Christian. I wouldn't have done something like that. I turned it in. But, most people just would have kept that $10. And then I heard they told me about it. And then I heard him telling the next person about it. And I heard him telling someone else about it. And I'm just like, why are you going around telling everybody about your great work of how you didn't take the $10 that you found at the gas station? And by the way, if you're listening, I don't even know if it would be wrong to take the $10 because whoever lost it's probably long gone. You can turn it in if you want to. Not a big deal to me, but I'm like, if you're not going to keep it, fine. But why do you go tell everybody about it? Why is it something that you have to go around and make sure everybody knows you didn't take the $10? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I just think this is what Jesus is talking about, that whenever we do good things, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. If I do something good, I don't even want anyone else to know about it. Okay. I just want to keep it as private as possible. Literally keep it between me and God. One more thing to look at today. One more verse I want to just point out here is James 3:1. Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. So I would just say this too, if you want to be a teacher in the church, and it didn't say preacher, okay, it's not just talking about pastors or even deacons right here. It says teachers. You want to be a Sunday school teacher? You want to be a Bible study teacher? You want to do what I'm doing right here on YouTube? Or if you're listening on podcast, because this is available in podcast format as well. If you want to do that, James 3:1 says you need to be just a little bit more careful about how you watch your life because you're going to be held to an even higher standard than other people. I guess the average Christian would be. Okay, nothing wrong if you just want to be the average Christian. Nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, if you desire to be a teacher and kind of put yourself out there like that, then just be careful. Okay, that you got to make sure that your standard of living is up to the level of what you're saying. Like we used to say, practice what you preach. Okay, make sure that you're practicing what you preach and even be practicing the things you don't necessarily preach because you're going to be held to a higher standard if you put yourself out there as a teacher. All right, teachers are supposed to know better. So I just mentioned that too. How strict is the higher standard and all that? I don't know. I'm just telling you what the Bible says right there. I wish it went into some more detail. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I'd say this. I think if you are really devoting yourself to be a teacher of the word, you'll be given a greater reward for doing that well. All right. There's only I think it's in 1st or 2nd Timothy in one of these pastoral epistles, it talks about those who preach should be considered worthy of double honor. Now, there's a lot of different groups that the New Testament tells us to honor, in the Old Testament, I guess, too. A lot of different groups out there of people to honor. We honor those in authority. We honor our parents. But there's only one particular role that the Bible says is worthy of double honor, and that's the role of being a pastor. So I think there's a greater reward out there, too, for being someone who teaches the Bible and devotes yourself to the study of the Word of God. There's a greater reward for that, but there's also a harsher, I think, punishment or losing of rewards if you don't do that well. So if you put yourself out there like that, I just admonish you on that to do it well. Watch your life and your conduct closely, because I don't want you to lose any rewards that you've earned. I want heaven, I want the millennial kingdom to be as wonderful for you as it possibly can be. So my encouragement to you is just to be careful about that. If you do something good, don't go feel like you have to make a big scene about it. You don't need to don't make a small scene. When I do something, if I do something good, like I try to make sure no one even possibly knows about it, because I don't want anyone to think, oh, he was just doing that for glory or popularity or something like that. Like, I don't want there to even be a chance of that. Okay. I'm not even going to give examples. Okay. I'm just not going to talk about it. As far as you're concerned, I've never done anything good for anyone. All right. We'll just leave it at that, because I'm not even going to go into it. I take this stuff seriously. I don't know why more Christians don't get this, because my parents drilled this into me from a young age. Okay. Like this is something I remember as little as I can be, learning from my parents. Like whenever you do good works, I remember my mom saying when I was real little, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And I'm like, what does that even mean? I'm just like a little 5-year-old. I remember her saying that. She said, don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing. And I think she told me that in the context of like, if you give to someone in need or if you give something to the church, she's like, keep it low key. I had that drilled into me from a young age, but I don't know. It seems like not everyone, apparently not all Christians did. So I'm telling you that, hey, now, okay? The Sermon on the Mount, a lot of the verses that we looked at today came from Matthew 5 and 6. It's that section on the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus said a lot of things in there about losing eternal rewards. If you want to just kind of a quick study on eternal rewards, go read the Sermon on the Mount and pay attention every time Jesus says the word reward. He uses the word reward a lot in those chapters. This is what you can do for a reward, or if you do this, don't expect a reward, okay? Or your reward was the glory that you received here on earth, but now you're not going to receive any glory from the Father whenever you get into the millennium. So, stuff to watch out for in our faith and in our conduct. Let's wrap it up for today. Next time on this podcast, I'm going to be talking about the millennial kingdom again. We're going to be looking at society and governance in the millennial kingdom. We're going to be talking about what it's going to be like in the millennial kingdom of Jesus as far as the government goes and as far as how society operates. We'll be focusing more so on government, but if you want to get that, then make sure that you're subscribed. You can be getting this in the audio format, audio podcast, or you can subscribe here on YouTube to get that. I want to let you know about a significant life change for me, temporary life change, but it is going to affect this podcast a bit. So there's a church that's not too far from where I live, and they are currently, as of today, without a pastor. And so I'm going to be filling in as their interim pastor, and I've committed to doing that for at least a couple of months. I think it's going to take them about 2 months probably to find a pastor, maybe 3. But anyway, I've committed to at least 2 months to help see them through this time period. And so I feel very confident about doing that, like that it's something God wants me to do, and I'm really excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. It's been a couple years now since I worked for a church, and so I'm glad to be able to do that again, even if it's just a temporary thing. I'm really excited about it. But unfortunately, also in the next couple months, I was planning to focus hard on this podcast and wrap this baby up because we're close to the end of the book of Ezekiel here. And the thing with these last chapters is they require a lot of study. I'm kind of going through them pretty quickly compared to how I was going through Ezekiel before, but they are about the millennium, and I don't know everything there is to know about the millennium. I mean, that's not a subject that I've studied in depth. That's why I'm doing this in-depth study and doing episodes like this to talk about things tertiary to the millennium. But anyway, this is a lot of uncharted territory for me, a lot of uncharted territory for you, because I'm sure you've never heard a Bible study on Ezekiel 44 like we did a few weeks ago. You probably never will again, but you get that here. I'm trying to do a really good job with it. And so if I'm going to keep doing that level of quality, that's going to be really hard to do this podcast and be an interim pastor. Plus I do another podcast called Weird Stuff in the Bible. Plus I work 40 hours a week in my full-time job at a Christian radio station. So I just got a lot of things on my plate. And so I say all this, I'm excited about the next couple months, but I don't know if I'm going to get to the end of Ezekiel now in the next couple months. I don't want to detract and just rush through it. That's kind of what I was getting at. I want to keep putting in the level of quality of study that I had been putting into these lessons, but I don't have the time to put in that level of quality. So here's what I'm going to do, okay? Because I'm like, okay, maybe I could double dip on this thing. Like maybe I could teach the church what I'm doing in Ezekiel, but I don't think so. Like in a couple of weeks, I'll be going through Ezekiel 45 and 46, and I want to be talking about sacrifices in the millennium. And I don't think that this church is going to care to hear about whether there's going to be sacrifices in the millennium. Like they're looking for their next pastor. I need to be giving them other stuff. So I don't think I can double dip. This is kind of a niche topic, what I'm doing here. So here's what I think I'll do. I'll get through 45 and 46. And then before I tackle Ezekiel 47 and 48, which are the last 2 chapters of the book, I think I want to spend a few weeks and kind of do like a greatest hits of Ezekiel type of thing. Okay? And I'm not going to just rerun old episodes. I'll re-record new ones. But I'm going to recover some of the content that I've already taught on the podcast and just hit some of the highlights of Ezekiel. Okay? So you might see some of that coming over the next few months. And that will help me, because then while I'm coming up with, Wednesday night Bible studies and Sunday morning sermons for this other church, that way I can put a lot of focus into that and doing well for that church. And then when it comes to this podcast, I'm not having to pump out brand new content every single week. I can kind of revisit maybe some of my favorite lessons from the past. And so that's what I'm going to try to do so that I don't overload myself too much. All right. So, hey, by the way, a lot of people have joined the podcast here in the past year. I've been kind of amazed because I thought the podcast would really dip in the downloads in like the last several months of it as we were going through the last chapters of Ezekiel. And it's not been the case. I keep just getting more and more listeners, where we have like probably about 5 times more listeners right now than what we did a year ago at this time. It's amazing to me. Like, a lot of people are jumping on board here right as I was winding down the podcast. So anyway, if you're new to the podcast, guess what? This is good to get these highlights, revisiting some past episodes, because like I said, I'm going back to some of my favorites, some of Ezekiel's greatest hits, and bringing those back. So you never heard this stuff before. So I think it'll be really good to look at some of those highlights of the book of Ezekiel as we close out this podcast. So the end is still coming. It's just been delayed a little bit. But I appreciate you tuning in tonight. Thank you for listening to this Cross References Bible study on the book of Ezekiel. This has been Luke Taylor, reminding you that if you will live like no one else now, you can live like no one else later in the Millennial Kingdom.